Hi everyone, this is Melvin Lim with PropertyLimBrothers. Now welcome to our next episode of our Q&A #PropertyLimBrothers show. Now we have a few interesting questions today which we want to answer. Why don't we get straight right to it? Alright. Now, first question we have, pretty interesting. It says that I bought a private property and tasks required by HDB to sell my flat within 6 months in order to claim back the ABSD that I paid when I bought the private property in the first place. However, I'm finding it hard to get a buyer and the 6 months deadline is approaching. What will happen to my private property or the HDB flat I'm holding? Now, I presume that this question is asked by somebody that has already bought a private property while holding on to their HDB and they have already paid their ABSD in advance. So if, let's say if you are a Singaporean and you have a HDB flat, you want to buy a second private property first before selling your HDB flat, you have to pay the additional buyer stamp duty because your HDB is not sold, so you are deemed to be buying the second property. Now, when you do that, from the moment that you exercise the OTP for your private property, you have 6 months given by IRAS to sell off your HDB flat, which is your first property, in order to be eligible to claim back the 7% ABSD that you have paid in advance. What will happen if you don't sell off your HDB flat in time? Number one, your ABSD will be gone, meaning that you cannot claim back the ABSD. No grounds for getting extension because IRAS is very strict on this. Why? Because you plan forward to buy a second property first and you actually have the ability to do that and pay the ABSD. So they are very stringent on this part, which usually no extension is given. If you cannot sell off your HDB flat in time, and take note that the timeline is from the date that you exercise your private property to the date that your buyer for your HDB flat exercises the option to purchase for your HDB flat. So you have 6 months. If you can't do that, then your ABSD is gone. Now, what will happen to your HDB flat? If, let's say, you bypass that 6 months, then you can decide whether do you still want to sell your HDB flat or to hold on to it. Now, it's entirely up to you. You can continue to hold your 2 properties, or if you really need to sell off, you can sell probably in the 8th or 9th month, but your ABSD is not claimable anymore. I hope that answers your question. Alright, next question. What are the do's and don'ts of conducting a home viewing? Now, if you're planning to sell your house, I think the first thing, very importantly, is that your mindset has to be correct. Because when you sell your place, your property becomes the next home for the next owner. So you've got to prep it in such a way that any buyers that walk into your place, they have a great experience viewing your property. Now, some of the key few things are over here. Number one, declutter. Declutter your home. I mean, make the home neat and tidy, the surface tops, dining tables. Sometimes when we stay in the home itself, our stuff just gets so much and there's just too many toys and too many stuff hanging around everywhere that makes the home seem smaller and smaller and smaller each day. So decluttering is ultra important. Secondly, empty homes are very hard for buyers to visualize. If you have seen our previous video, the home that we have sold for this Anchor View owner, whereby we took over the whole place and then revamped it, brought in our staging team, and then the place was sold in 14 days after being left in the market for 1 year. Now check out our video and we'll put the link in this video as well. So empty homes are very hard for buyers to visualize because they cannot visualize and appreciate the layout, the placement of the furniture, and when the place is properly dressed up, the full potential of the property comes out in a sense. Third thing, don't be at home. Don't be at home when your agents conduct the viewing. And now that's very important. Some people ask me why. Now, Singaporeans are generally respectful people. I mean, whenever, let's say we want to buy a property, let's say if I'm a buyer and when I walk into a home, if I have some very concerning questions, for example, I want to ask like, hey, is it very hot or is it very warm? How are the neighbors? Is the road noise very noisy? Hey, why is the room size so small? When was the last renovation? And stuff like these questions that sometimes we are not sure as buyers. Will we actually be disrespectful to the owners? So generally, if the owners are at home and the buyers come and view the property, buyers tend to be very quiet. And buyers don't dare to air out their objections or some of the questions that they might want to clarify with the selling agent. And that is actually a very huge disadvantage to the seller because the seller agent will lose the chance to answer any form of objections that the buyer might have. After viewing this place, the buyer might just go and view another 4 to 5 properties, and the feeling of viewing this home somehow is different because they walk out of the home with a sense of a few objections in their heart not being able to be answered. They don't want to ask the questions. They feel that they want to respect the owner by not asking the question in front of the owners. So very importantly, if you can't hand over the house to your seller agent, probably go downstairs for a cup of coffee or sit by the poolside and stuff like that, then let your agent do the work and conduct the viewing. Let the buyer have the space also to roam around, because sometimes the buyers come with their own agents and maybe the buyer is a big group, husband, wife with a few kids. And if the owners are also inside, the entire place also looks very cramped and smaller as well. Something to think about. Now, the fourth thing, if your place is cooling on a high floor with good view, then open up all the windows for good ventilation. Now, if it's a hot day, let your buyer have a better experience on the aircon. I mean, when you on the aircon, if they still want to see how's the airflow, they will still open up the windows and stuff like that. So that's perfectly fine, but importantly is let the buyers have a good experience viewing your property. And finally, you have to add value to the buyers as well. So usually what we do is that when we sell the properties for our clients' home, we prepare e-brochures with all the information, the fact sheet, floor plans attached as well. When the buyer comes, we send them the e-brochure or we send to the buyer's agent so that when they walk out of your property, they have the full information, and that gives them a lasting impression to consider making an offer for your place. Alright, hope that answers. Now, I have an interesting question about dual key units. So dual key units, how do they work and are they a good investment? Good question, and I personally think that dual key units are fantastic. Great rental play. You get to rent out 2 units, but you only purchase 1 unit. I mean, so for example, if you buy a dual key 3-bedder with 2 bedrooms at one side and then a studio unit at the other side, these 2 units technically become like 2 separate properties. So usually for dual key units, when you come in, when you buy the property, you actually have 3 keys. 1 to the main door, you walk inside the foyer, have another 2 keys that goes to the separate units itself, and then you can actually rent out the 2 units to 2 separate tenants. Or you can stay in 1 unit and rent out 1. So depending on which one you want to stay. But there's a few things that you need to take note, because if you were to purchase a dual key unit, there's some potential issues that you need to foresee first. For example, number 1, does the unit have split electrical sub-meters or not? Now, if not, then you have to get an electrician to make sure that your electrical meter is split up. You can make sure that the electrical sub-meter account for each unit differently. If not, when you rent out both units, they all go to the same SP services account, and that's very hard to account to each of your tenants. Now, secondly, also make sure that you know what you are getting into, because sometimes when you buy a dual key unit, the tendency of having tenants issue might increase a little. For example, how about the internet connection? You need to plan that as well. Like, will you be supplying the internet connection for both your units? Because you might not be able to split up the internet connection. Now, how about at the foyer area? Is one tenant going to affect the other tenant? For example, we heard about a case from one of my associates whereby they rented out a dual key unit, both units for their clients, but one of the tenants always smoked. During the night time, the smoke actually traveled under the doorway into the foyer, into the other unit, and that causes a lot of repercussions, because the landlord and the landlord's agent will have to handle a lot of all these tenancy issues, because one tenant is complaining about the other tenant and stuff like that. So some key things to take note, probably you might want to have a little bit of a house rules when you term it into your tenancy agreement, but overall, dual key units are, I think, a fantastic form of investment property.